Hello, welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. It's not coffee today. I had coffee earlier. This is a cherry tarragon soda. It's rather good. There's this thing I do. It is not as noticeable when I'm a game master. It is more noticeable when I play. I will occasionally pull stunts out with a player character in a role-playing game that will make the other players, and more importantly the game master, look at me and go, how the hell do you come up with stuff like that? I don't think inside the box. I don't think outside of the box. I don't acknowledge that the box exists. I try to push the bounds of what is possible in a system and in imagination in general. It can get a little exciting. As was described for Doctor Who in one of the episodes of The Doctor, I start a situation assuming I've won and work my way backwards to how I got there. My imagination is trained for that. It is not an entirely happy story how it got that way. I've talked about some of my addictions. My coffee addiction, I exercised it earlier. My caffeine addiction. I am addicted to daydreaming. That sounds like a really, really safe addiction to have. Very few physical side effects, and you're not chemically dependent on stuff, except you kind of are. The mind has defense mechanisms. We all have a set of defense mechanisms so that things that would cause us mental trauma have to go through barriers to do that. We project our problems onto other things. We develop an escape from a situation that we are currently in that our brain doesn't want to develop. Our egos are delicate and fragile things, and we find ways to protect them. Escape was my defense mechanism of choice. I have mentioned before, I was bullied pretty heavily as a child. Not so much my first years in school, but moving from California to the Midwest and going through elementary and junior high education in that environment, I was not prepared for it, and I was not an athletic child. And that worked against me socially. Also, undiagnosed learning disabilities and social disorders. I had problems adapting to the people around me, and that contributed to a certain amount of social abuse. Let's call it bullying. I had long bus rides from my nice home through the rural country into the junior high, and that could be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and 15, depending on the weather and how things were going with the roads. Surrounded by people who kind of wanted to kick my ass and who didn't have any qualms about doing it on a bus. I went someplace else. I had started doing it a bit earlier. My first elementary school wasn't a great environment, and there was it was an athletic environment, and I was not an athletic kid, undiagnosed asthma, among other problems, so I walked out of it with some bruises. I put my mind someplace else. I'd think of something that was preferable. I'd imagine myself stronger or with more support. I had imaginary peanut gallery that could approve of things about me when the people around me didn't. It got fairly fanciful. I pumped a lot. It was the 1970s and 80s. There was enough media for a kid my age to pump more than a sufficient amount of imagery into my head. Battle of the Planets and G.I. Joe and a lot of Zap, Pow, Bang. It was around this time that my father and I discovered we had a mutual respect and admiration of Bruce Lee movies and Kung Fu in general. And there's Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica. I absorbed this stuff like a sponge and processed it through in my head so that I could cope with the world outside my head by going into the world inside my head. I spent a lot of time looking out windows. I learned to adapt music to my daydreams and vice versa. It was to this day, it's a practice that I use, helped me focus more through the ADHD, and things got very fanciful. The problem with defense mechanisms is that they're a stopgap measure. They allow you to protect your ego from things in the outside world, but it is important that you adapt your relationship to the outside world so that you don't have to use your defense mechanisms as much. If you overuse your mental defense mechanisms, they can transform into mental disorders. It's not the only way to get mental disorders, chemical imbalances and genetics and all sorts of things, but I overused escapism tremendously. There were some attempts to get me counseling, which I really appreciate. Unfortunately, the counseling that I got, the counselor was, let's say, he was from a religious organization as opposed to a secular medical organization, and he had a very small toolbox of problems that he could fix. So I went with this complex problem, and he tried to fix a much simpler problem that he would rather have fixed than the problem I went there for. I ended up having to deal with most of this on my own. There were ways. Role-playing games actually really helped because, yes, I was still engaging in escapism, but it wasn't just me alone. There were other people around. It was guided. It was structured and ordered, and there were rules to it. I couldn't just jump off of cliffs in my head without intending to jump off a cliff. And there were people. There were friends. It helped adapt me to the world outside so that I didn't need to escape as much, while it was giving me mechanisms, rules, a language for adapting what was going on inside my head. Not only that, but for allowing me to share what was going on inside my head. I learned to write around this time too. So I could take the things that had been trapped up here that I was trapped in, that I couldn't escape while I was trying to escape, and I could put them on a page, and people could see them and start to understand. I've been doing that for a long time. Bruce Lee once said, "I do not fear the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." It takes thousands of hours to master a skill. Thousands of hours in dedication, and I daydream every single day. I take time out. It is part of my mental health regimen. It is part of my daily routine. I get up. I catch up on the world. I caffeinate, clean myself up. I take some time to daydream. There is a packet of daydreaming in my day between caffeinating and writing. I work out the skills and the abilities that I have generated in here. So, when my 4th level gnomish wizard, who is out of spell slots for his first, second, and second levels, is faced with the remaining drow assassins that are after the party. And in the first session, I bought a pound of ball bearings. I will find a way to use a pound of ball bearings to deal with the drow assassins, even if it is dumping it down the front of their pants. Slowed him down. I have 1 spell slot left. I did not want to miss with a witch bolt, and filling his pants with metal gave me advantage on hitting him in the crotch with the witch bolt. Super effective. I've written rules in role-playing games that allow for the overt use of techniques and procedures and maneuvers that are not covered other places in the rules. I believe that that kind of improvisation is important in a role-playing game. And I will always, playing or game mastering, I will start to ignore rules when improvisation comes up with something better. If I've done something that seems spectacular, it's because I work through ridiculous fantasy combat situations in my head for hours a day, every day. When I was sick, when I had, between chemotherapy and radiation and the painkillers I was on, all I could do was watch YouTube. Thank you for those channels that pulled me through. I'm looking at you, Linkara. And put on some music and fight in my head. Fight every day. I intensified my daydreaming regimen during that time, in fact. I'm still kind of at that level right now. There's a little kung fu going on in the back of my mind all the time. And to the point where if I'm not paying attention, I'll start taking up stances. Improvisation is like a muscle. Mental improvisation, physical improvisation, whether you're creating, or you're writing or cooking or designing games. And the more you exercise it, the more you can do. You can wear it out from time to time. You know, there are only so many neurotransmitters in a neuron. But the more you do it, the more networks you build up, the more connectivity there is, the more neurons are involved, the longer you can sustain the effort, and the more complex the effort gets. How do I do that? When I pull, that's a bunch of vampires coming at you. You've only got the 145. You don't think that's going to hurt you. It's like, well, wood hurts them, right? Well, yeah. So I'll grab a piece of the firewood, I will throw it up in the middle of them, and I will use my 45 to bark it into them. Didn't kill them, held them back. Splinters hurt. How do you think of that? It's not that I've done that specifically, but I push myself in my mental exercises. I find things in my head I haven't done before, situations I haven't done. That's where my character designs come from. It's where my villain designs come from, and a lot of the mechanical designs that come up in my head. Always, constantly, never stopping. That's why I have surrounded myself with tools that let me try to take what shows up in here and put it out there. It's creating. It is a continuous, unending creative effort, some of which I get to share. Some small percentage of which, oh man, I could provide material for an animation studio for the rest of its natural life. I could generate concepts for game studios, and I'm helping a couple of independent designers at the moment with some background concepts. It gets a little tiring writing all my own material and coming up with stuff, especially when I get to parts that are not as creative focused and more numeric and system focused. But I can get through that too. I'm working my speed back up there. Damage. I'm not suggesting that everyone spend several hours a day daydreaming. A little while. I mean, you could do a lot worse. Positive mental imagery is a really beneficial thing to have in your life. Taking a little while to envision yourself successful, powerful, empowered, more to say. Things that you want to have in your life. That which you focus on, you strengthen. Taking a little while to put yourself there, not necessarily a bad thing. Then you have to come out of that and work towards it in real life, but maybe you have a little bit more mental preparation, a better idea of where you're trying to get, set and firm goals. All good things. I started dedicated daydreaming round about the age of 8, meaning I have put 42 years into this skill. There's a lot of other skills I could have put into 42 years worth at this level. But this is my skill set. It has spread to other skills. It has helped me to accomplish other things in my life, for which I am grateful. A lot of good stuff in here. And occasionally it allows me to really surprise a game master, if not earn me a little bit of shock and ire, which I am perfectly content with. If the game master isn't a little miffed that I got past a trap that was meant to kill us all, then I'm not doing my job as a player right. Very few game masters I play with are in any way competitive. We all have good stories at the end of it, and I like that my disbelief of the box entirely can lead to a more imaginative and more engaging story from time to time. Daydream. Find your music, sit down, set aside just a little bit of time. 10, 15 minutes a day, a couple of songs that get your blood pumping a little bit. Find what it makes you do in your head. Sit down, relax. Take a couple of deep breaths and go someplace where you can do absolutely everything you need to do. And who knows? After a while, you probably can. Well, that is my ramble on daydreaming and my past with it. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. If you have your own experiences with daydreaming, want to hear me talk about other subjects, leave me a comment. I'll love getting a comment. You'll love leaving me one. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, why not? My channel is awesome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to see these notifications as soon as they come out, hit the little notification bell next to the subscribe button. If you would like to help my channel in a more substantial fashion, I invite you to hit me up my Patreon page, www.patreon.com, and consider donating. Absolutely anything helps and allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me, and I will see you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.